All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Mental Toughness and Body Show. My name is Rob Evans. I'm your weight loss coach, health strategist, and internationally published author, helping take your life and your business, your health, fitness, mindset, and body from where you are right now to where it is that you want to be. As you can see on screen here, I have an amazing guest with me today, Jim Penman. How are you going today, Jim?
Oh, I'm wonderful. I'm really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. Now, I don't want to introduce you because I want you to be able to tell us, because it's probably your first name that's more famous than your last name, because you're the Jim from Jim's, what started as Jim's Mowing. So Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit how you got started and how the franchise has evolved? And I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you in between.
Well, I never intended to go into business. I intended to be an academic. I spent my 20s doing a PhD in history, trying to work out the reason for the rise and fall of civilizations, and came up with an approach that I thought was valid, but it needed a lot of money to take it further, mostly in terms of biological funding for research. And that was difficult because I was completely flat broke, deeply in debt. So I took my part-time student job mowing lawns and went full-time. And then I put on subbies, and a few years later, in 1989, I franchised. We've currently got just under 5,000 franchisees in Australia and New Zealand and Canada.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you've said that so humbly, but you know, you are Australia's biggest franchise operator. I was curious as to how long were you like running your own business before you said, no, I'm going to take this to a franchise model?
Well, when I was a student, I was gardening from 1971, so 70, but the year before I started university. I had a gardening business, and I bought a mower about 1975. So by the time 1982 came along, I'd already been doing this thing for more than a decade in a sense.
Yes.
But after I started full time, I think I started employing workers, within a year or two. It was quite fast.
Yes.
And I put on subcontractors initially, and then used to build up and sell lawn mowing around. So by the time I came to launch the franchise, I already had I probably had about a dozen guys working for me in one way or another. So
yeah. So what was the reason for going to the franchise model and not just staying, just local, if you like, and working with those subbies?
To be honest, mainly fear. It was because I had this little business building up and selling lawnmower rounds, which was going okay, and I paid off my debt and bought a house and stuff, and that was nice. And then this company called VIP came in from Adelaide. Yes. They terrified me. They had 250 franchisees, interstate company.
Yeah, wow.
These guys all crushed me like a cockroach. So I first approached them about trying to join forces with them and help them to grow. And when they knocked me back, I decided I better try and compete with them. And
yeah, right. Oh, that's interesting, because if somebody had have asked me, I would have said, oh no, Jim's was around first.
No, you would think so too. They had 250 when I signed my first one, which was, and actually, in fact, when I started, somebody asked me how many franchisees I might have one day. And I said, well, if it goes really well, I might have 100. So
yes.
My expectations weren't all that massive at that time. A bit of surprise it worked out so well.
So I'm interested with, so how long were you doing the mowing franchises before you made that decision to, okay, let's branch out into other things? Because you're in about like 45 different categories now. Would that be right?
Saying it was a decision is probably not quite correct. As in a lot of things at Jim's, it wasn't actually my idea. I first of all, I had the idea of doing cleaning, but I thought, well, this thing here, this is what I used to look like. This is me with a beard and a hat. I used to wear a hat mowing lawns.
Yes.
And that's a mowing image. That's a gardener, isn't it?
Yes.
And so Jim's cleaning obviously didn't, because that could be a woman. I mean, who want to have a business with a guy with a beard and a hat and a gardening image on a woman who's cleaning houses?
Yes.
So I thought I'll develop this thing called Sunlight, SUNLIT, with little sprays and stuff, the same franchising system. So I sold a couple of franchises and completely failed, couldn't find any work. So I ended up giving the money back. And then sometime later, somebody came to me, and that was just probably about 1992 or 93, something like that, fairly soon, and said, well, what about Jim's cleaning? And I said, well, it's not going to work because it's a gardening image. And he said, well, what if I do it in a sort of partnership? I said, all right, have a go. And it worked. So it was kind of a bit surprising. It wasn't my idea. Most of the visions we started weren't actually my ideas. Mostly people came to us to suggest it.
Okay, so then you went from mowing to cleaning, and then
Yeah, we got dog wash and fencing and all kinds of things come up after that, and test and tag and pest control, and I have a struggle trying to remember them all actually.
Yeah, I'm sure, because there's just so many of them.
Yeah, that's right.
So is it a case of, like, I stand back and look at it and think, well, a franchise model, it's about systemization and making things as seamless as possible. And therefore, once you've got that model down pat, you can really apply it to any business. Is that the way you sort of
except ours are very different as service type businesses. We had a go at health clubs at one stage, and that was a disaster. Okay. It wasn't done under Jim's name. It was a different brand, but we didn't understand it. So yes, we do stick to service businesses of the kind we understand. See, mowing and cleaning and pest control and dog wash are all very similar. The person calls up, book a job in, we quote, all work very much the same way. But something like a site-based franchise or anything to do with food, we just don't touch. It's just too different. You would not try and compete with the likes of McDonald's or Domino's or any of those. They're too good at what they do. Yes.
Yeah, right. And so with the, like with franchises, I know, like, historically, not all franchises have a very good, like the franchise, well, the way that the feedback that I get, having worked in corporate life as well, and the business that I was in was a big organization, they had franchise ease work for them. And there was a big perception by the franchisee that the only one really making the good money was the franchisor. And so how have you been able to, I suppose, flip that around so that people can say, well, I guess this is a partnership, we're in this together kind of thing, to build that different relationship?
Yeah, there's some good franchises around. There are some absolutely appalling ones, far worse than the public could possibly imagine. And we know that from the inside. Look, it's got a lot to do with your personal passion. I mean, one of the things I've always done is I think long term. And my first priority is the welfare of my franchisees. It's actually at the bottom of my email. When you got an email from me, you notice at the bottom of that, my first priority is the welfare of franchisees. We're also passionate about customer service. We only sign franchisees and franchisors we're convinced will succeed. Well, that attitude that franchisees are number one over money, over everything, is something that gets driven in all the time. In training, I do the first 2-hour talk. Anybody wants to be a franchise, I've got to do that. They've got to listen to that talk. Yes. And I really press hard what that means, how tough we are, how hard it is, what responsibilities we have. We give our franchisees extraordinary rights. They have the right to vote out their franchisor, including me if I'm the franchisor. They can veto changes to their own manual. They can change to a different franchisor. They can build a business as big as they want. There's a whole lot of things built into the contract and system that are just legally, they have very, very strong, and that was position. That was there from the beginning. But a lot of it's just your attitude. You know, if you want the franchisees to succeed, if that's your top priority, then on the whole, they will. And a good example of that is McDonald's, that I admire very greatly. They're a really great company. And the interesting thing about McDonald's is, you probably know that when they first started off, Ray Kroc made no money out of it.
Yes.
Because he spent so much effort in supporting his franchisees. In fact, he was making his income from the Mixmaster business that he had prior to starting McDonald's.
Right.
That's how he made a living. And his first franchises were millionaires before he even drew a salary from the company. So that was the attitude that he had. He was just emotionally fanatic about his franchises making money. And I got the same drive. And because first of all, because of my influence, and also because I get to choose the people that become franchisors in particular, that tends to be fairly widespread. I mean, let me give you one example of how this matters. I had a case recently where a woman approached me about a problem she had with the contract they were about to sign. And she had some delays and stuff. And then I asked some questions, and I found out that she was buying a franchise for her son. This was a mowing franchise, who was in his early 20s. And I asked why, and she said, because he can't find a job. And I immediately said to her, I will not sell your son a franchise. The franchisor who did this did the wrong thing. He should not. That is guaranteed failure. He can't find a job. His mother's buying the business. We know that's going to fail. So I said no, and she got very upset with me. And she said, look, I wish I hadn't called you. And I said, it's the best thing you ever did.
Yes.
he said, what do I do with my son? And I said, well, I know franchisees in his area who really, really need work.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is to arrange for him to go out on the road with a couple of these guys. If he's good, he'll have a job.
Yes.
That'd be great. Now you can imagine what happened. He was hopeless, absolutely hopeless. Now, if this poor woman had invested the money into a franchise, she would have lost it
all. Yeah.
The point about that was that the franchisor who made that decision to accept this guy did something that was grossly immoral by our standards. So when his franchise regional directors come up from renewal shortly after, because it was a 10-year contract, we actually refused to renew.
Yeah.
Now, we allowed him to sell it, and he made good money. He actually sold it for a lot more than he bought it for.
Yes.
But the fact that he had allowed this young kid, or his mother, to buy a franchise which he had essentially no possibility of succeeding was a gross breach of our ethical system.
Yes.
Now, it's easy to, it would have been easy to sell that franchise. You would have made money from it short term, but you would have done the wrong thing because you would not have looked to the best interest of the person you're dealing with.
Yes. Yeah.
That's just an example, but that's the way you've got to think about it. If you're a franchise, you can never think of the money first. It's always the franchisees first.
Yes, and that's why you're as successful as you are, because you're thinking about it differently, and you're thinking about the end results and looking after the people.
In the long run, you make more money doing it that way, but you never ever. You always got to think long term, never short term, and money can never be the major consideration. Of course, you've got to make money. Franchisees actually get really mad at me all the time, but you know why? I had a really, really angry franchisee ringing me this morning because we were making him attend meetings. He didn't want to attend meetings, and I said to him, "This is the best time you spend in your business all year. It is the most valuable. We're talking 8 meetings a year. Here we only have to attend 6 of them. 6 meetings a year, 6 evenings, maybe a couple of hours. So you're talking 12 hours a year, and that's when you learn how to grow your business." And he didn't want to go, and I said, "You have to go, or else you'll be made non-compliant, and your fees will go up." And he got really angry, and he said, "That just proves you don't care about your franchisees." Well, to me, it shows that I did care about his work because I wasn't going to allow him to do something which is not. Same thing with customer service. Franchises get very angry about complaints sometimes. They say, "You're causing me mental illness." And I said, "Yes, but if you give great customer service, we know from experience, you're going to be far more likely to report good income. You're going to stick around longer. We know that. I've got all the statistics to prove it. People who leave on the whole, who fail, have, and the great majority of people do succeed, but those who fail tend to have poor customer service records."
Yes. Yeah, there's always an opportunity in any complaint, isn't there, to improve.
Yes. Well, actually, our colleague, when a complaint comes in, I'm the only person that can delete a complaint. You've either got to show me the complaint was wrong, which sometimes they are. You know, the customer says never rang. Well, if I rang within 2 hours and I sent a text, or more commonly, you go and do whatever you can to fix it. You go back, do the job again, you rebate, you refund the client, you do anything at all, make the customer happy some way, offer them a freebie, do something, make them happy. Yes. That's the lesson. And that drives it home. And as we've done that sort of thing, we've found that the level of leads have risen dramatically. So far this year, 37% of leads are unserviced. We just can't cope with it. And we're giving back. We've given back more than $1 million in advertising money to franchises. People can't spend it. So the leads are coming in dramatically. But of course, what that means is that most franchises are flat out, so they make good money.
Yes. Yeah, that is cool. So tell me where you are personally right now. Is your focus now on, say, I don't know, building relationships, like on a day-to-day basis, where's your focus for the business and building it and so forth?
Well, the thing is, Rob, I'm a pretty lousy manager. I'm not very good at doing very much at all. So what I tend to do is to stay in touch with a lot of people. Every franchisee has my direct phone number and email address. And as I said, only 5,000 of them. Anybody can ring me anytime, day, evening, weekends. They've got problems, email me, and they do. I do with a lot of complaints. I chase up customers that have been bad looked after and trying to work out solutions to help them to be satisfied.
Yes.
I just spend time talking with managers about how to improve things and new ventures we're on and so forth.
So it's really about building relationships with the franchisees and franchisors that you have working for you.
Yeah, well, because I don't know most of them very well, because there's just too many. I know some of my franchisors quite well, but try to listen to what they want. You've got to keep your ear to the ground all the time because then you pick up things that are going wrong. And many times, I mean, there wouldn't be a week goes by that I don't pick up something from a franchisee and I say, well, this isn't right. Let's fix it. Let's do something better.
Yes.
Improve it.
And are you good at innovating? So do you hear those things and think, okay, we need to look at this new technology, or we need to resolve this systemically, rather than, okay, let's address your issue right now. It's like, oh, that's systemic. Let's have a look at some innovative solution.
Actually, Rob, I'm pretty awful at almost everything, but one of the things I do well is I'm very creative. I have spouting ideas. I drive people mad. I keep on coming and thinking, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do this? Why don't you try that? And some of my stupid ideas turned to be quite successful in the end. So yeah, that's about all I'm good at.
So perhaps give us a bit of a perspective on like the team that you have around you to support you with all these ideas that you're throwing out there and driving people crazy. What's your team look like?
Well, actually, the strange thing, most of my department heads are female. You know, we people having approached you about having a balanced sex ratio. I said, well, I have to fire a woman if I did that.
Yeah,
balance it out that way. My Rocky's a great guy. He's like looks after the divisional support and so forth. He's used to work in prisons, actually, the administrator. He's very, very good as a manager. He just organizes things. We've just taken back the call center, and he's making sure that's done well, looking after support of people. We're just setting up a registered training organization, and we talked about it just today.
Okay.
How we're going to make that work and expand it and use it to recruit franchisees, also from overseas. I've got a wonderful CFO, a lady called Cynthia. She is very, very dedicated. She's far more concerned about my money than I am, actually. Sometimes she's too stingy.
That's what you want.
That's it. Incredibly honest, wonderful woman. She's also very innovative too. We've just set up a admin center in the Philippines to look after some of the back office stuff, which is pretty big. Also, she's developed a financial system to get loans through to franchisees more easily.
Okay.
I've got Megan, who runs the system we call Jim's Plus, where we sell surplus leads. Because we've got so many surplus leads, there's very bad customer service, so we have a way of giving them to carefully screened external contractors. She does that.
That's a good idea.
My wife looks after SEO. She's very, very good on that kind of thing. She's very detail-minded. We've got a very great CTO, a guy called Patrick, who's rewriting a lot of our software. We've made some appalling mistakes in software. We just got the wrong systems in place, and he's organising a rewrite of that. So we just got a lot of very good people around. Charlene, who runs the call center, she's doing really well. Yeah,
nice. And so tell me, what would you say is the biggest mistake that people that go into well, I suppose the biggest mistake that franchisors make, but also like I work with some smaller local businesses here, and they are just starting to dabble into, like they've got like one franchise, for instance, and they want to get bigger. Well, I suppose let's divide into two parts. First of all, what would you say are the biggest mistakes that people make?
Well, the biggest mistakes people make is looking after the money before the franchisee.
Yeah.
You just got to look, you just got to look at one thing. How can you make your franchisees into raving fans? What do they want? What do they need? And that applies in some different ways. What's the best number of meetings? What kind of meetings? We've worked out, for example, you need 8 meetings a year is optimal. More than that, no better effect. Less than that they do well. We've also worked out that it's good to have food with meetings. If you give them a pizza or a barbecue, something that works better. We just discovered that fairly recently. People trying different things.
Something so simple.
Yeah. In the beginning, we didn't understand meetings. One of the things we do now, we get our franchisors to ring franchisees regularly, at least once a month, but preferably once a week. We found that has a big effect. We found that even a 1-minute call once a week is more effective than spending a half day once a year on business review.
Yes.
Then you got and understanding too that a lot of success is not, franchisees on the whole don't need to be taught how to do the job. What they need is a little bit of business help and support at times, but also emotional support, being part of a community, part of a group. And what's very interesting, which surprised me from what I understood from the beginning, is that we've got franchisees who have been paying franchise fees for years and they never take any leads at all. Even though we've plenty, we try and persuade them to, because we've got too many leads, but they're happy and they like to be part of us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that family culture. But I love what you say there, because if you take care of your customers, in effect, your customers are your franchisees and your franchisors, then if you're always having that focus on them, and you said something before about your CFO, making like them treating their money better than, more carefully than if it was their own.
Our fees are actually quite modest. Our fees would average about 6% of turnover. They're not calculated that way. They're calculated as a lead fee, base fee plus lead fee. But the average franchisee, based on recent surveys, is just under $3,000 a week, and our fees would average about $750 a month. So it's about 6%. Right. They're not high fees.
No,
there's enough. There's a good margin in there, but you don't want to maximize the profit. We also don't charge a lot for in-going to, and we tend to bring the fees down with time to what it costs to get into. We're always trying to work out ways to make it more affordable to get into the business. Yeah,
more attractive. Yeah, that's good thinking. And so what would be kind of what you've just said there is probably the first tip, if you're going to say, give people a couple of tips if they were setting up wanted to set up a franchise system. One, make sure you're looking after your franchisee is probably the first one.
Yeah. People want to be a franchisee because they want to make a lot of money.
Yes.
You want to be a franchisor so your franchisees can make a lot of money. That's the key. If your franchisors, these make a lot of money, then in the end you will make money, but that's never number one.
Yes.
So things like how much you charge initially, it's not a great idea to charge too much for a franchise. Our franchises come down and down and down in value because, first of all, these days we don't need to spend a lot more advertising than as much as we used to, but also because it just makes it hard for somebody. It lumbers them with a higher debt. So we make very good money. I'm a lot more famous than I'm rich. I say that because I think that with nearly 5,000 franchisees, I'd be very, very rich, and I'm not, because it's a fairly limited stream. But I do pretty well.
Well, I mean, just I think I saw that you're doing something like out of all the franchises, something like 500 million a year. Is that accurate?
It'd be closer to $1 billion these days.
$1 billion. Wow. I mean,
yeah, because don't forget, let's say we've got just under 5,000 franchisees, and the median turnover is around about just under $3,000 a week. So if you figure that out, that's about $700,000 a year. But you've got quite a few franchisees who are making like $1 million a year or $2 million a year because they're very big businesses. So that kind of distorts the figure. So it'd be close to $1,500,000, that's for sure.
Yeah, wow.
But that sounds like a lot of money too, but don't forget, we only get...
Yeah, of course.
Well, actually, counting the large ones, we get a lot less than 6% of that. And then out of that comes all the support and the advertising and the customer and the call center, and we spend probably $5 million a year on IT development. I mean, there's a lot of costs coming out. So there's when you say it's a trickle at the end, I don't make me feel sorry for myself. It's not much by comparison to what goes in the other end.
Yeah, but it's the model that you've been able to set up to create $1 billion of sales is just phenomenal.
But the thing I take most pride in, though, like in our last, usually we do a franchisee survey once a year, and typically it's about 50% good income. We don't ask how much, we just ask how satisfied. Good income, about 10% poor income, and the balance is satisfactory. Well, this last year we're down to 8% poor income. Now that's a really, really, really powerful statistic. But if that one ever gets down to 0, then I'm going to be very happy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So is that like the best way for you to, so obviously you've created this real family environment, and like you have 8 meetings a year, everybody's got your contact details and stuff. I'm assuming there's a whole bunch of people that would be terrified to ever call you or whatever, but they're with those regular people that always do that. The best way that you find to, or the strategies that you put in place to, I suppose, still make everybody feel like a family? Is there a lot of internal communication, like weekly things, or how do you achieve that so well?
We send out newsletters, but mostly don't read them.
Yes, that's the problem.
That's part of the point of newsletters is if I put out a newsletter 3 times and say, if you can't get to the client, you've got to text. And then they come back and said, I tried to ring the client. And I said, did you text this? No, he told me that. I said, it's been in the newsletters. So if that's the reason you put it, not because they'll read it, but because you can at least point out you tried to tell them.
Yes.
So, but look, we do what we can. I wouldn't say every franchisee's a raving fan. I wish they were, but not everybody's going to be happy with us all the time. A lot of people don't like me very much. They think I'm too hard.
Okay.
Commonly the case. And I can be fairly abrupt sometimes. I got a franchisee upset at me this morning because I yelled at him, which I shouldn't have done. It was bad of me, but I just got annoyed.
Yeah.
He was accusing me of this and that. And anyway, I have a bit of a temper, unfortunately, Rob. One of my many weaknesses.
Well, I was going to get to some of those in a moment, if you had any.
Oh, if you start on weaknesses, I'll go on for an hour and a half.
I wanted to tap into the experience of COVID, and I want to talk about you personally, yourself first, before we talk about the impact it had on the franchisees and their mental health and so forth. What would you say you've learned about yourself over the last couple of years with COVID hitting?
Be more careful speaking to the media.
Okay.
I did an interview with Channel 7.
I think I saw that.
Well, I carefully explained why I thought that it was legal for our people to work based on the Department of Health and Human Services. I said, that is the law of the land, not what the Premier says at a press conference.
Yes.
And then at the end of that, I also said, well, and they said, what if they do go out and they get fined? And I said, well, they're obeying the law. But if they do get out and get fined, then we'll pay the fine. And then because as far as I was concerned, I was confident that they would do what was doing was legal and they couldn't be fined for it. And it wouldn't ever pay a fine. So that was the point I made. Now, what they did is they cut the interview and they took out all the part about me saying that we were believed that we were obeying the law, and they just took out the part where I said, if they get fined, I'll pay the fine. So it sounded as though I was trying to get people to break the law, which I wasn't.
Yes. Yeah.
So I learned from that if you do an interview, first of all, if it's not live, and I love live is better. If you do an interview that's not live, you've got to put everything you need into a single sentence. You can't break it up. And the second thing is, if I'm going to be interviewed by anybody from the media, I have somebody sitting there with a camera recording
exactly what's happening.
So we can do that. We had that happen with Current Affair. Actually, just last week, they did an interview about something, and I had somebody recording the whole session. Now, as it happened, it was a pretty fair interview, and they did put in the stuff that I wanted to say. But at the same time, you've got to be careful. So that's one thing I learned for sure. I've also learned that just the power of publicity was just extraordinary. I just think it was amazing too. The lefties and the lovies and the woke media, nothing at all. No, if 100,000 plus Victorians are out of work, not interest of ours, we couldn't give a stuff. They're only plebs. It was News Corp. It was the people like Sky News and that actually give the stuff about the whole situation and gave us good support. And I think put a lot of pressure on the state government not to do such stupid things in future, because my people will not and never have been a risk to public health.
Yes.
And we got that point across very well, because towards the end of it, about 95% was in favor. And people were saying, yeah, we agree with you. Why is it the individual operator can't do something where a council workers in groups can do it?
Yes.
Why can you not have somebody come and wash your dog with no contact with you, but you're allowed to go into a grooming salon with dozens of other people, and that's okay? Yeah. How does that fit in with anything to do with infection? And people got that point, and it was a great experience, actually. In the end, it actually came out very well for us. And I think put great pressure on the government, but it was also good PR for us, surprisingly.
Yes.
Didn't start out that way. After my first interview, 2 of my daughters wouldn't speak to me for months. They got so angry. But I had dinner with one of them last night, and we were laughing about it. But
and from your own personal perspective and how you were able to manage yourself, and obviously being forced to lock down and like having to deal with the media and stuff, did you find you get some personal growth from the whole situation?
Look, personally, I'm extremely tough. My wife says I'm like one of those, one of those plastic things that's got a weight in the bottom, and you knock it down, just spring back up. I'm just like that. I do not. It was very hard, though, because I was hearing day by day from franchisees who were so desperate for not being able to work. And they said, Jim's, when's it going to stop? When's this going to be over? When can I go back to work? It wasn't just the financial pressure, though some of them were under, because some of us, like students, didn't have any income at all.
Yes.
There's one poor girl who had been threatened with eviction. We said, if you get evicted, you come to us and we'll put you up at our conference centre for free. But people were giving her vouchers for meals and stuff. The other franchisees, they were wonderful. They really, really spectacularly great the way that people helped each other during that time. But it was very hard. It was emotionally difficult. I personally know two men who lost their homes and their marriages as a direct result of that lockdown. It was awful.
Yeah, and I guess to put this in perspective for the international audience, I mean, I'm based in Melbourne, you're based in a different part of Melbourne as well, and with the most lockdown city in the world, and just crazy. It made no sense. I think we had, I lost count, but I think we already had at least 6 lockdowns, I think, for extended periods of time. Lost count of how many days, but like 250 days or something. And yeah, the impact that I saw it have on mental health. And this show actually came out of COVID, started it just before COVID hit. And I recorded every day to help people become, you know, a little bit more mentally tougher. How did you find that the franchisees and franchisors, just generally speaking, were like pulled together as a community, or really battled?
They did. They were wonderful. I remember one particular guy, Test and Tag franchisee from Melbourne. He rang me up and he said, "Jim, I'm out of work, but I'm financially comfortable. Is there anybody who needs help?" And I thought that was really amazing. This is a guy who'd lost his own income.
Yes.
Recognized that others were doing it worse. And as I said, the people who gave, they used to give her like, what do you call it, the home delivery menu log vouchers.
Oh, yes.
This poor girl who's actually doing fantastic. And last time I heard, she's turning over like $4,000 a week. She's got a great business, but that was really hard for her. She's a lovely girl. She's a foreign student. So it was a most horrifying experience. The emotional hurt that people felt was beyond belief, and at the same time it was very, very uplifting. But you know, these things often go together, Rob. They really do. They do. You know, the worst thing that ever happened to us in the whole history of Jim's Group, it wasn't the lockdown in Victoria. It was when one of our franchisees in Western Australia, a Mowing franchisee, he killed his 3 little girls and his wife and his mother-in-law. He killed them. Now, it wasn't the business. He actually said, so I have to hasten to say that it was just some inner demon. Yeah. And I went over to speak to the franchisees in Perth. We met at a golf club there. And most of the franchisees in the entire state were there. And I have to say, most of them didn't know this guy. The mood of grief and in that room was extraordinary. And I just said to them, people, what can we do to reduce the chance of such a thing ever happening again? And I came up with all kinds of ideas. Like, for example, they said, why don't you put a fridge magnet out to every franchisee and put all the emergency health numbers on? So we did that. As soon as I got back, we did it. Have a psychologist on site. So we've now paid for a psychologist. Any franchisee who needs professional help can ring up somebody free of charge, qualified psychologist, to get them counseling on the phone. We made sure all of our franchisors had mental health training, so that, you know, I've gone through it myself, so that you know how to deal with the franchisee.
Yes.
But the thing that really impressed me the most was during that meeting, somebody came up with this thing. They said, what about if some of us were to volunteer to be mentors to the franchisees who've got problems? They don't want to talk to the franchisor. There's nobody they can talk to, and we could volunteer to do it. Unpaid position. And I said, well, that's great for you to suggest that, but how many people would be prepared to put in for something of that nature? And you know what? Most of the people in that room put up their hands, most of them. Yeah. And that was, it was very moving. It was a horrible, horrible experience. It was so, it's still even hard to think about what happened.
Yes.
But the way that these people, these wonderful people, just said, we are a family, we're together. And bear in mind, they don't know this guy, but they just thought, he's a fellow Jim, he's a franchisee.
Yes. This
is what's happened, and we want to help each other. Yes. How amazing is that? Yeah,
it's amazing, isn't it? It's incredible. Yes. And you do some work with Beyondblue as well. I saw on your website you've done a couple of things with that. Which, so for those internationally, Beyondblue is helps. It's not just men, is it? It's anyone that's suffering from depression, mental health issues, needs someone to speak with.
They do wonderful work.
Yeah, it's a great organisation.
That's right. We also, one of my daughters, actually, one I was talking about before, she's involved in a charity called Friends for Good, which helps to build relationships with between people who are lonely, which is a wonderful actual charity.
Yeah, that's lovely.
They have a helpline and people can ring them, but they actually, when people actually get help, they after a time, they often recruit them to come in and be helpers. It's all about building ties, building relationships. And I love that sort of thing. To me, community is incredibly important, and it's more important the more you understand. The things that went wrong during COVID, you can see the damage. We had a young guy in our office, from our office, commit suicide during one of the latest lockdowns. He actually killed himself. This young guy, he's like early 20s and just new in the IT department. And I spoke with his mother afterwards. She was a wonderful lady, and it was, and then you look at it too. And you know, one of the things that she said is he was doubtful about. He was coming up to his 6 months, and he didn't know he'd have a job. And I said he was great. Everybody loved him. I wish I'd told him that.
Yes.
Just let him know that he'd done such a good job. He was just. He had emotional problems, obviously, but just that thing working from home was really hard.
It's too much.
Yeah. So we try very hard to build relationships. We have a staff lunch on a Thursdays, for example. The last part of it is people get out there and they go down to the conference center, which is just a short walk across the grounds, and they eat lunch together. And then we have things in the evenings like games nights and quizzes and stuff. And we try and build relationships with staff. One of the things I really want to set up, we talk with people now, is to have individual counseling for all of our staff in the way that Lululemon does, where you actually talk to them about not just the business, but also about their personal lives and fitness. Yes. We provide fresh fruit to all of our staff so that they can eat healthily. And we're having, next month, we should have a gymnasium finished so that they can
work out
stay healthy.
So
we try and really look after staff because social relations, fitness, health, exercise, eating well, these are all part of a great life. I don't know if you know the Harvard study, the one they did that's been lasting 80 years, looking at Harvard students and trying to understand what's the difference between those who become happy and well and those who are sad and sick. And there's some really interesting findings from that study. Things like exercise, proper weight, not smoking, not drinking beyond a very small amount, being able to cope very well with emotional problems, with crises and how you approach those, constant learning, keeping your mind active, and social relationships.
Yes.
Very consistent findings across all kinds of areas of life. And that's a really powerful thing. And you look at all those areas. So you see, one of the things I looked at when I was reading about this just a few months back, I said, well, I'm doing really well in everything except I'm not quite so strong on the social relationship side. I'm a bit confined to family. So I made a point of actually inviting staff members and others and various of my kids and so forth to go out regularly to eat dinner and these kinds of things, just building social ties with people I get on with.
Yeah, I mean, it all makes perfect sense to me. That's where I spend a lot of my time every day, helping people become healthier. And it's like wealth without health is broke.
It's meaningless. It's meaningless. A close friend of mine, his brother, committed suicide. This guy was worth $100 million. He just killed himself.
Can't take it with him.
Stuffed up family. Well, sometimes wealth can be incredibly destructive. There was this, again, the same daughter. She was actually, her fiance was was at Oxford with this guy who was from a very wealthy family, and they'd given him a allowance, a really generous allowance until his late 20s. And this guy is so messed up. He's really, really screwed up by all this too much money. He's just got a terrible attitude towards life and people. It's wrecked him. My kids, actually, I mean, we're obviously pretty well off, but they look at all this stuff on the media about people with fancy cars and mansions and overseas holidays, and here's their old dad with his 10 grand Mitsubishi and shabby clothes from Kmart, and this guy, it doesn't fit the image of rich people. But it's not. There's no happiness in that. No. People think that the more money you have, it's not true.
No.
In fact, spending money on chasing status by things like expensive cars and goods is it's a terrible way to spend money. Yeah. It's actually a lot better to spend on experiences. But the number one best way, I'm sure you know this, how do you create happiness with money? You give it away to a cause that you are involved with, like my church or my research project. And I would give away something like 80-90% of my actual income
Yes.
into a cause that I passionately believed in. That's happiness for you.
That's right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's like you look on social, I don't know whether you spend much time on social media, but you know, every time I switch my phone on, I'm like doing a post myself, it's head shaking, the amount of lack of authenticity that you see with the way that people present themselves and standing by, you know, the car or the plane or the helicopter or whatever, making out that they live this lifestyle. But it's like, no one really cares, because the most successful people in the world, and like yourself, you don't show that stuff.
The ironic thing, of course, probably if I wasn't reasonably successful, nobody would want to hear from me.
Yeah, that's right.
But the fact of the matter is, the money is pretty irrelevant. Look, you know, one of the greatest men I ever knew of, I didn't even know him, but I knew a couple of his kids, was the man, you know, his best job he ever had in his whole life was to be a tram conductor.
Yeah, okay.
That was his job. They lived in this little tiny house in Fairfield. There were 6 kids there. And this guy was very active in his local church and stuff. But the kids have turned out so well. They're absolutely brilliant, all of them, brilliant
Yes.
children. I knew 2 of his sons. And that to me is a successful life.
Absolutely.
I can the stuff that he had no money ever.
Yeah.
But he was a successful man. Whereas, you know, someone like some of these squillionaires, like what's the guy that had that huge, he left his massive art collection. It was an oil, Getty, Paul Getty.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Getty. You know,
Getty,
what a very awful life that guy had. What a waste of space.
Yes.
Because all he had was money, and he left this overpriced art collection. That was his contribution. Now, I deeply admire Bill Gates, for example.
Mm.
Now, he's a great businessman.
Yeah, the foundation.
But he's a greater philanthropist, and he now dedicates himself his whole life to giving away the money he's saved
that he's
millions of lives. Now, that is a really great man.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Hey, I'm just conscious of our time. I want to be conscious of your time and your generosity here today. I did have a couple of questions for you. So what would be an opportunity that you didn't take, and on looking back, you'd say, oh, I should have taken that?
Well, in my kind of business, opportunity is always there. There's just so many things that I did wrong. For example, I kept on plunging. I'm very impulsive. I'll tend to dive first into things I know nothing about, make terrible mistakes, like telling my factory to make fiberglass trailers, which was pathetic. Lost a whole lot of money. One guy was injured doing it, which was just awful. But he's okay. But things like that. I tried to set up a psychology institute, which cost a lot of money and was bad. I just didn't put. I should have got better IT head long way years ago than I have. We would have been so far ahead. It's just I just plunged into made so many mistakes, so many different ventures, mostly just being wildly impulsive and not counting the cost. As far as anything I should have done, haven't, I don't know. I mean, Rob, I've been divorced 3 times. I'm an impossible person to live with, obviously, though 21 years for my last, so we're going all right. No divorce in sight. So I just don't, my whole life is one series of blunders. I am frankly often flabbergasted I've ever achieved any success at all in life, but you know, God has mercy, I guess. I mean,
but you keep pushing. Now, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that you haven't made the same mistake twice, and they're different mistakes, but you just keep pushing through.
Well, sometimes it's the same kind of mistake, because I do tend to be very passionate. I'm extremely emotional, intense, passionate, and I just go barging into things. So it's a similar kind of mistake. I think I've learned that these days. I've got people around me who are in my years say, Jimmy, should we be doing this? And so I always think twice, think 3 times, take advice. So I hope I won't make that mistake again. But I learn all the time. I read a lot.
Still learning.
I probably read 2 or 3 books a week, at least all or in part, and I'm always learning new ideas and things. Yes. I read the most wonderful book recently called The Expectation Effect, which you should read if you haven't read it. Okay. It's just amazing. It talks about the way that what you expect actually influences how you behave and what it means and how much your health is. It's just rephrasing things.
Yes.
It's a wonderful book. I'm going to recommend it to everybody I know.
Yeah, cool. Well, you've mentioned it here. So what would you say is, so what's next for you? Well, now before that, what drives you now? what is it that drives you? Because you're successful, you probably don't have to work anymore, but you do because, you know, you love it. So what would you say drives you now?
Well, my research foundation is the core value, really, because it suggests that it's going to seem totally, completely grandiloquent, but I think I've got good reason for it, that if you could, that changes in society and what happens in society, it reflects changes in character of individual people. And these characters are basically epigenetic. They're based on the way that people's genes are turned on or off, different genes. And if you could understand that process, which with modern technologies within our grasp, you could actually change character. And therefore, if people wanted to, you could do things like you could cure poverty worldwide. You could deal with problems like drug addiction, alcoholism, many forms of mental illness. They could be cured. It could change the world in a dramatic sense. Now, frankly, anything, though I love what I do in gyms and I believe in it, nothing I do in business could possibly compare with the value of the science, what that could achieve. And that is a major driving force. Apart from that, my family, I've got 10 children I love dearly.
10 children, wow.
Yeah, I love kids. I really enjoy kids. I've just been out having lunch with my son, actually, which is wonderful. We've been talking about, one thing we've been discussing is, he came up with, he's an amazing kid, he's just 13. But one of the things he said, if you could have a magic power, which magic power would you want? He loves fantasy books. So we're discussing all the different magic powers and how they would work. And oh, it's amazing. Aaron is wonderful. So
I love Bill Gates's answer to that question. Do you know what it is? Be able to read faster.
Really?
Yeah, which really makes sense, doesn't it? I think I like that, to be able to absorb and retain more information quicker.
Well, I said my number one thing is to be able to read people. If I could understand how good a person was, I said I'd be a billionaire in 6 months. Well, not quite.
Yeah, if you could bottle it and sell it, for sure.
Because then I could look at somebody who wanted an employee and I find the absolute best person and do the job perfectly. I know exactly who I could trust and stuff. That would be fabulous. Eternal youth would be good too. I mean, if I could get younger and stay that way forever, I like that one. Power to heal, that would be good. So we had all these discussions and stuff. And
yeah, cool. So what would you say is next then? What's next for you?
There's so much going on. There's really extraordinary amount going on. We've got this registered training organization, which we're just starting, which has amazing potential because we can actually train people to do basic tasks like fencing and pest control and stuff, and then either develop them as workers for our franchisees or get them to take franchises themselves. So that's very exciting. Bring people in from overseas. There are tens of thousands of people from other countries that would love to come to Australia. We can bring them in, give them a great business, get them started. Our success rate is very high with people like that.
Is this a model that you could say, yeah, look, let's get franchises happening all over the US?
Well, actually, funny enough, I was talking to somebody this morning about that. It's mainly, this is a guy who's got contacts and offices in the US, and we described what we wanted. We said, we don't need someone with a lot of money. We need someone with the right attitude. And give us the context and we'll spread in the US. It's the right people, doesn't require a huge amount of cash. So but going overseas would be great. Starting up new divisions would be great. We've got a new software that we're developing for our franchisees, which would have dramatic effects, and not just for them, in helping them to be more productive, look after customers better. You know, if customers could book their jobs directly into the franchisee's diary, for example, ways of making sure that reduce the number of complaints. I reckon with software, within a year, we'll be able to reduce our complaints down to 50% of what they are now. And they're already a fraction of what they used to be, just by redesigning the processes and giving warnings and so forth and write messages to clients and stuff. So redesign that kind of thing. There's an incredible amount of stuff going on. It's amazingly exciting. You have no idea how fun business can be.
I know.
It beats anything.
I know. And I'm about to ask you what annoys you, but I was going to say, when I hear people, like during COVID, for instance, I'd be working with people and they would say how bored they are. And I felt like reaching through Zoom and slapping him and say, how dare you? How can you be bored? And they say, oh, I'm watching all this stuff on Netflix. I don't even have Netflix. But I think this is such an exciting and unique time that we're even now living through. There is so much opportunity and so much excitement out there that you can't stop. And I'm just sorry I wasn't born a robot, because I wouldn't sleep. I just keep going and going and going because there is so much to do.
Yeah, oh, it's exciting. Life is amazingly exciting. There's just so much potential in everything. There's so many things you can do. IT's changed everything, Rob. It really has. If you were in a completely static world, it'd be very difficult to progress. But when everything changes all the time, there's so many avenues, there's so many ways, and somebody who's flexible. Flexibility and focus and effort and ethics matters so much in terms of what you can do. Look, we've got brilliant people, and you mustn't think it's me. I am the least of what goes in Jim's career. We have a young guy called Dan Carl who was a high school dropout, hopeless in school, went to work for McDonald's. A few years ago, he bought a franchise. He said getting $25,000 to buy his Mowing franchise was the toughest thing he ever did because he had no money.
Yes,
a 25-year-old. By the third year, he was turning over just under $1 million a year. He's now sold his franchise. He's now one of our top franchisors, and he's probably going to stop. Maybe if nobody else does, he'll open up the United States for it. He's an amazing guy. He's also part of our training program. He's teaching others to achieve great things. The people who started work with him are making $300,000 in their first year as franchisees, which is double the normal. Because that's great. I mean, this is a young guy who's a high school dropout, no education as to speak of, well, beyond early high school.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
No tertiary degree, but he is incredible. He's an amazing guy, and he's inspiring tens of thousands of people. He's 27 years old.
And if he was living, say, 30 years ago, nowhere near the opportunity that you have now.
Well, possibly not. But then again, it's a lot of people who started off with me 30 years ago are doing very well. There's a young bloke, Andrew, who was one of my first franchisees. In fact, he bought a lawn mowing run from before that became one of my franchisees. He became a franchisor. He launched the fencing division. He's now a multi-millionaire with his vast nursery and building projects all over the place. I mean, there's always the potential. One of the things people don't understand is the opportunity in the service industry. People are so tied up with it. I've got to be a lawyer. I've got to be an accountant. I've got to be some finance manager. No, get out there and start building fences and cleaning pools and doing those kinds of basic jobs, because there's so little, the competition is, it's not very good, frankly. It really isn't. And you can be so, if you're even halfway moderately decent like myself at what you do, you can actually do surprisingly well. You don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to be, you can make all the stupid mistakes in the world. There is so much opportunity. It annoys me. You know, one of my, I won't say who he is, I've got a nephew who really, he's not academic, and his mother wants him to go to university. And I said, don't let him. It's
not going to work.
Come on.
Yes.
It's not right for him. He could be he's a lovely guy. He's a lovely young man. He's just not suited to academics. And we push too many people into that rigid guideline. You got to go to university. You got to get a degree. Yeah.
Office
Most
job.
Education is pretty useless, frankly, after high school. All it does is give you a bit of a step over the opposition in terms of applying for a job. I mean, that
gives you an interview. That's about it.
Yes. You learn far more on the job than you will, like Dan, but employers won't give you time of day. But most people coming to gyms actually come in through different avenues. Like my top managers were, you know, one I told you before about the lady who runs my what we call Gyms Plus, where he gives out the surplus work. Now this is one amazing manager, but you know, until I gave her a pay increase a few years ago, and she had tears in her eyes. She said, this is a woman who's about 40 at the time. She said, this is the first time anybody's ever given me a pay increase, ever. She's always only had the minimum job, and she got the opportunity. She's now this phenomenal department head. She's so wonderful. She's dedicated. She's creative. She's always coming up with new ideas. The amount of potential in people that you would think would be
it's just untapped a lot of the time.
Yeah, and you'd look at her and you would not know this woman had what she is, but Megan is wonderful. She's just a great, incredibly dedicated, incredibly ethical, incredibly nice, staff lover, endlessly creative. And how much potential is there in the population?
Yeah, I know.
Pigeon themselves in these stupid, you've got to get educated, you've got to do this. You know, the most unhappy people in the world are probably lawyers. They really are.
Yeah, well, I've heard a stat that something like 87% of people, I think this is out of the US, but 87% of people that go to their jobs each day hate them. Not just don't like them, they hate them.
Well,
87%. That only leaves 13% that are showing up.
That one is. That's possibly a bit exaggerated. I think most of my franchisees will probably like what they were doing. One of the things I do, actually, I ring up one major man, a bit like every 10, 15, 20 years, that kind of thing. And I talk to them about it. And I get some wonderful, wonderful stories from those people. Now, admittedly, they're the ones that have lasted, but they basically said the same thing. This is just the best thing. I just wish I'd done it ages ago. It's been terrific. I see my kids grow up. There was one bloke, actually, I never forgot this. He used to work for he was managed a supermarket. It was one of those independent supermarkets.
Okay, like an IGA or something like that.
I think it was an IGA, yeah. And he used to work very long hours. And one day before he was going to work, his 4-year-old son, he had to leave very early. His 4-year-old son said, "Daddy, I wish you could have breakfast with us." And he drove to work and his tears were streaming down his face. He said he quit his job. He bought a mowing franchise and he's seen that son grow up. He's had breakfast with him every morning.
Yeah, it's special.
And I said, "Did you ever thank him for that comment?" And he said, "Every day."
Yeah.
Now, he's not actually, I don't think he's actually making any more money than he was as a supermarket manager. But what he's got is something that's far, far more valuable, which is time with his son. And that, no matter how much money you make, you could never get that back.
Yeah, that's right. Don't get back the time. Yeah, wonderful. So, Jim, I'm conscious we could keep talking for hours here. I know that you've got your own podcast and a few books out there. Did you want to mention those and how people can get hold of them?
Yes. Well, I've got a book called Surprised by Success, which you can just go, you can look at it from Amazon, actually, or you could go to www.jims.net and you can see the links in there and you can get a copy and stuff. We give away by the bushel load.
I'll put the links below the podcast when we post it.
Yeah, put a link in, just link to the website.
Yes.
If you go to, and there's a whole lot of stuff in there too about me, and probably far more than anybody would ever want to know. But
and you've got a podcast as well. The detail, what's that called?
Well, it's kind of like we call it Ask Jim, and that runs on Facebook on Monday nights at 7 o'clock for an hour. But you can also get the recording. Once again, if you go into
I'll put a link in for it as well.
You'll see the link to meet Jim, and it's all in there, all the links in there. So it's quite fun. I enjoy it, actually. I'll ask questions about anything. Some of the most fun ones are nothing to do with it. When somebody asked me to say, if you were in ancient Rome, which Jim's division could you run? I love the curly ones. So that's a bit of a
chariot polishing. Jim's chariot polishing. Jim, this has been absolutely illuminating and a great honor to speak with you here today. You've shared so much with the audience. Really appreciate your time. It's I've learned so much about you. I love your passion, everything that you're doing, and the support and the family and the relationships that you're building out there. It's a real credit to you and your team.
All right, thank you, Rob. Good to talk to you.
I'll talk to you next time. See you, Jim.
Okay. All right.